At this time, we will continue with section 1.6. In this part of the notes or this video, we will be adding and subtracting decimals and fractions. In my first problem, I have a negative 5.2 minus a negative 11.4. Remember, if you have two negatives back to back, that means a positive. Rewriting this problem, it would actually be negative 5.2 plus 11.4. At this point, I see that I have different signs. Different signs tell me to subtract. When I subtract decimals, I'm going to put the larger number on top, so 11.4 goes on top, and 5.2 goes on the bottom. And I'll go ahead and subtract. 4 minus 2 would give me 2, line up my decimal, and 11 minus 5 would give me 6. Looking at my signs, my rules say subtract and take the sign of the larger. Since 11 was positive, my final answer will be positive, and it will be positive 6.2. Looking at the next one, you have a negative 5.26 plus 8.1. Different signs, subtract. When I subtract, I'm going to have an 8.1 in the top because that's the larger number, and a 5.26 in the bottom. Notice when I lined them up, I made sure that the decimals lined up, even though the 6 stuck out to the back. To hold its place, I'm going to put a 0 over that 6. And now we're ready to subtract. When I get ready to subtract, I'm going to make this 0 into a 10, which means I have to borrow from this 1. 10 minus 6 would actually give me 4. Now I'm trying to subtract 2 from 0, which can't happen. So I have to borrow from the 8, making it a 7, and that makes my 0 turn into a 10. 10 minus 2 would give me 8. Keep my decimal. 7 minus 5 would give me 2. To find my final answer, I have to decide, is it positive or negative? Since 8 was positive and it was larger, that means my answer is also going to be positive, positive 2.84. Looking at the next one, you have a 3.4 and a negative 6.5. Those have different signs. Different signs tell you to subtract. 6.5 is larger, so I'm going to put it on the top, and 3.4 goes on the bottom, making sure I line up my decimals. When I subtract, 5 minus 4 gives me 1. 6 minus 3 gives me 3. So I have a 3.1. My sign rules tell me that I subtract and take the sign of the larger. Since the 6 number was larger, that means my result is negative. One more of this. You have negative 2.6 minus 5.84. These have the same sign. Same sign tells you to add and keep the sign. I'm going to write my 5.84 on the top. I'm going to write my 5.84 on the top. But when you're adding, it really doesn't matter which one you write on the top. My 2.6 I'm going to write beneath it, making sure I line up my decimals. Remember, same sign tells me to add and keep the sign, so I know my sign here is going to be a negative. I can put a 0 here behind the 6 to hold the place. Remember, I'm adding. 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 6 is 14, and I carry the 1. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 plus 1 is 8, and this would give me a negative 8.44. All we have left are fractions. Negative 3/5 minus 1/3. I see that these have the same sign. The same sign tells you to add and keep the sign. So I know I'm going to be adding these fractions. But what I have to do first is get a common denominator. The common denominator for this problem is going to be 15. So I'm going to turn this 5 into a 15 by multiplying it by 3. If I multiply on the bottom by 3, I have to multiply on the top by 3. To turn this 3 into a 5, to turn this 3 into a 15, I'm going to multiply it by 5, which means I multiply by 5 on the top and the bottom. So this would give me a negative 9/15 minus 5/15. And I know my common denominator is 15, so I just bring it over. Across the top, I combine my terms. I have a negative 9 and a negative 5. Those have the same sign, so I'm going to add them and keep the sign. And my answer is a negative 14/15. 3 left. The top one is the worst one. The first thing I notice about the top fraction, top problem, which says 2 minus 3/4 minus a negative 7/8, is that the 2 is a whole number. So my first order of business is to actually turn it into a fraction, which makes that a 2 over 1. Then I have a 3 over 4. Remember my rule, 2 negatives make a positive. So this is going to be a positive 7 over 8. 2 over 1 minus 3 over 4 plus 7 over 8. My common denominator here is going to be an 8. So I'm going to turn this 1 into an 8 by multiplying by 8. I'll turn this 4 into an 8 by multiplying by 2. And this 7/8 is already an 8, so I don't have to worry with that one. When I simplify this out, I get 16/8 minus 6/8 plus 7/8, which of course is going to leave me with 8. Simplifying across the top, 16 minus 6 would give me 10, and 10 plus 7 would give me 17. And so my final answer is 17/8. If you simplify that and said that's 2 1/8, that would be just fine. That's the hardest one you would ever see. Let me rephrase that. That's the hardest one that you would ever see in this class. The next problem is 1/8 minus 1/24. Getting a common denominator, that would be 24. I want to turn both of these into a 24. So I'm going to multiply this 8 by 3, multiply the top and the bottom to be fair. The 24 is already okay. So this would be 3/24 minus 1/24, which I know is going to give me 24s. On the top, 3 minus 1 would give me 2. Now this answer is okay, but we would prefer that it would be reduced. And on any kind of multiple choice test, you're only going to pick the reduced answer. Since 2 will go into both 2 and 24, I'm going to divide both of these terms by 2. 2 divided by 2 would give me 1, and 24 divided by 2 would give me an answer of 12. So my answer for this one is actually 1/12. Speeding up to keep my video size small, 2 negatives I know will make a positive. So we would have 3/4 plus 2/5. My common denominator here is going to be a 20. I'm going to turn them both into 20s. I'll multiply the 4 by 5, which means I multiply by 5 in the top. I'll multiply the 5 by 4, which means I'll multiply by 4 in the top. Cleaning this up, it gives me 15/20 plus 8/20, and I know that's going to be 20ths. 15 plus 8 gives me 23. My final answer for this one is 23/20. If you said 1 3/20, that would be correct as well.